Absolutely. I mean, when you look at the growth of Vanguard, it basically looks like an exponential. I mean, exponential growth never continues indefinitely, but there's no natural limit in sight that would stop them to grow above whatever 15% or then 20% and whatnot. And these limits, I suppose, would have to be drawn by regulators. And even Jack Bogle, the founder of Vanguard, said that clearly there have to be limits, and it can't be in the national interest if Vanguard ends up controlling such large swaths of the U.S. economy, and not just in the U.S. but of course in publicly traded equities worldwide as well. So that there's a need to think deeply about what the optimal regulation and limits are. That is like almost universally agreed.
And coming back to the opportunity, kind of, do you think there's any way how to play it from your side, or what to kind of avoid, or what to get into in order to take advantage of it?
Oh yeah, I mean, individually the opportunity is obvious, which is you should buy index funds, right?
All right.
So
just ride in the gravy train, kind of.
Let's be very clear, right? So a lessening of competition tends to be good for shareholders. It's just kind of it's bad for consumers, and it's more bad for consumers than it's good for shareholders. So that's why on net it's bad for society, right? So the individual opportunities, they are obvious. There's also papers in the recent literature showing that active mutual funds that concentrate their holdings in particular industries outperform compared to holding a diversified portfolio, or compared to other actively managed funds. And of course that can have many reasons. One is that because it lessens competition, but another one is maybe these funds simply have industry expertise or whatnot, right? But I mean, but all of that is just to say that from the investor side, there's several proven ways of taking advantage of these developments. That's not a difficult kind of exercise. The difficult exercise is really for the regulator that takes the welfare of society as a whole into account and tries to figure out how to solve that complicated regulation problem.
And do you see this happening anytime soon, or are there any kind of discussions to follow and to see any kind of sort of change there?
So I had enough coffee this morning to feel optimistic. So let me tell you about a few positive, a few examples of where regulation is already happening. Okay. So one thing I may have mentioned earlier is that this doesn't only happen in private markets. It doesn't only happen in public equity markets. It also happens in private markets, right? So SoftBank, famously with the people I hang out with, was, or still is, I don't know that, but was anyways the largest shareholder of Uber, the ride-hailing food delivery yalla company, but also the largest shareholder of Didi, which is the Chinese equivalent, as well as of Grab. That's the ride-hailing
Southeast Asian equivalent.
Exactly, that stuff. And Ola in India, and 99 in Brazil, and so forth. Okay, so why would that ever be a problem? And the answer is because at some point Uber tried to compete with Didi in China, right? So prices were low. The payment for the drivers were low. Customer satisfaction was high. I mean, I love that as a consumer. But who doesn't love that? And the answer is the shareholder. Who likes competition? Who likes low fares and high driver salaries and like customer satisfaction? It seems like a terrible idea, right? So what happened is that SoftBank brokered an agreement between Uber and Didi, according to which Uber would withdraw from the Chinese market. And to make sure it never re-enters, it would withdraw in exchange for an ownership stake in Didi. So they got about 27% in Didi. And now you know how the incentives work? Well, I mean, if Uber ever were to compete against Didi again, they would hurt the value of their own stake in Didi, right? So that's like a pretty elegant way of just removing incentives to compete. And so this is anecdotal evidence from, the social media in China, but like basically it took a week. And the fares were up, driver salaries were low, down, customer satisfaction is down. And SoftBank was like, great, why don't we try that again with Grab and try to basically broker the same deal in Southeast Asia. But there the competition authorities, and that's the answer to your question, then the competition authorities went like, wait, we've seen this movie before. We're not going to allow this without further conditions of divestments of certain arms and so forth. So the regulators in Southeast Asia were actually quite on top of this. Anyways, there are many complications, but I'll skip over those. The Indian competition authority also mentioned, hey, if you try to pull that trick in India with Ola, we're going to challenge it. And as far as I remember, they haven't done that so far. So competition enforcers in Southeast Asia were quite on top of it. The European Commission has also made arguments about common ownership of competitors in merger cases, for example, between Dow and DuPont and Bayer, Monsanto, and so forth. So they are on top of that. The US DOJ these days started enforcing a competition law that prohibits directors of one company to also serve on the board of their direct competitors. Right? So you can see why that would be prohibited. But it basically was never enforced, the law. And they started doing that, which is obviously closely related because a private equity company that buys two competitors tends to also put directors on both firms' boards. So basically to weaken the influence of these shareholders on their portfolio firms' behavior, the US DOJ has started enforcing that law as well.